Toby Fox is your everyday man. If I met him at a bar, I probably wouldn't think much of him. Danerade does not condone underage drinking. I'd treat him out to a beer, we would talk for a bit, probably about whatever hot new gaming news is being talked about, like the Switch OLED having a brand new white design. Are those white Joy-Cons I see? Oh well. I'd say my goodbye, then he'd go home, never telling me he is the freaking mastermind behind Undertale. Toby Fox is a mad lad. He truly surprised me in what he was able to create, while also maintaining a humble and quiet lifestyle. I can respect the more chill and secretive approach Toby has made, and his games actually connect with me in a way that is very unique, at least in my opinion. Well, I think this better explains itself in the game Toby has recently been working on, Deltarune. Before I go into that though, I think it is important that I go over a quick summary of Undertale. Please though, I need to stress that I am definitely not as well versed in this story or even games as you are. Everything I say is going to be from someone who has played the games and has grasped as much as he can in the spare time he has. So if you are mad at me, I did not point out your favorite secret boss or that tiny Easter egg that occurs when you go to a specific location A and specific event B will happen. Please understand it is purely because I just don't want to watch a 2-hour long video of the secrets and Easter eggs from these games. Shout out to the mad lad who went through the time and effort to compile all of them though. Also, spoilers for the two of you that care. Look, you already know that Sans is the final boss with this super epic Megalovania song that plays over it, so just go play the game already if you somehow haven't been screwed over by the internet. Spoilers goes for Deltarune as well. Holy Temmies, is this a great game. Undertale is an RPG flipped on its head. As the trailer suggests, it's the friendly RPG where you don't have to kill anything. Every action you take, every decision you make influences the events around you. I don't have the time for a regular review, and I assume most of you watching have a firm understanding of what the general gist is of this game. So let me explain why this game works. Undertale has a concrete understanding of what it is. It uses its meta state all through the game. The humor, the characters, the gameplay, the story, all cohesively feels like every aspect of this game falls under the same roof. Within minutes of gameplay, I was immediately entranced with its writing and humor. The characters I met, I legitimately cared about. The events that had unfolded made me ponder what had just happened after putting the game down. The story was easy enough for me to understand while playing, yet still had enough depth to have conversations about it after playing. This was one of the few games I legitimately looked at the clock and said, wow, it's 2 AM and I completely lost track of time. I also greatly appreciate the little things that plague other RPGs that Toby has ironed out. For one, the world map is entirely linear, which sounds boring, but there is zero backtracking, and the game constantly gives you subtle reminders and hints on how far you are actually progressing to your destination. Undertale does progression better than one of my favorite games of all time, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, which is plagued with backtracking. Speaking of Paper Mario, the combat reminds me a lot of the action commands in those games. Instead of random numbers being thrown across the screen like in your typical Final Fantasy, now we can actually control the method of winning battles but also dodging incoming enemy attacks. It's just the tiny attention to detail that really sticks out. Being able to jump straight into a boss battle again without all the dialogue from the first time around, or having easy and convenient fast travel options baked all around the world. The game is not perfect as many would make it out to be, however. I thought the puzzles were pretty underwhelming for the most part. The art is really expressive, but some of it can look, I think derpy is the right word. The boss battles were amazing, but by late game, regular combat with enemies seemed a bit too predictable and mindless at times. I know that I just pissed on everyone's favorite game, but it's important to still critically look at a game and address any weaker points. Though in Undertale's case, the weaker points were pretty minor for the most part. These elements, in my opinion, would be cleaned up in Deltarune, however.
Yeah, don't make me use my special attack. He's got a special attack. Whoa there,
yeah, okay,
that's so sexy.
Just keep insulting him. Just keep insulting him.
That's so sexy. He got a special attack. The pirates are too busy.
I love a man with a special attack.
this game is pretty good too. Deltarune, in my eyes, is a masterful follow-up to the critically successful Undertale. Toby, knowing that just making another Undertale wouldn't work, stepped up to the taunting challenge of making something new and exciting. Something that kept all the core elements of Undertale, but yet spin it to be something crazy, just like how the first game was. He needed new themes, new set pieces, new toys to play with. Interestingly, what came of this is what the game calls a parallel universe kind of thing, where many of the same characters from Undertale exist, but things are just a bit off. Undyne has both of her eyes, Caddy and Braddy aren't friends, yet there are still consistencies within the world. At the beginning of Undertale, Toriel expressed how she always wanted to become a teacher, and in Deltarune, that is exactly what she is. It seems as though the actual spirit of each character has stayed the same, which is why Toriel still acts as a motherly figure and Alfie still is an awkward introvert. Here is one detail I guarantee most of you die-hard fans haven't noticed. I'm underestimating you guys, aren't I? Why is it that Sans is the only character design not to change? In Undertale, he clearly had an understanding of different timelines existing, so maybe this is another example of Sans possibly timeline hopping. He shows the ability to teleport. There I go again. I cannot talk about these games without mentioning all the tiny little details and many connections I've been making in my mind. I picked up on these loose threads within just casually playing the game, and putting the pieces together was a joy. Toby strikes a good balance here in my opinion, as these familiar characters are still present, but throughout 90% of the main gameplay in each of the game's 2 available chapters, they appear nowhere in the Darkner world. It's all about the new story and characters, while still keeping Undertale's strong structure like its combat system and progression. Darkner world, you might be saying. The Darkner world is where this game's new adventure takes place. Our new characters of Chris, who mind you is an anagram of Frisk, except 1 letter off. Susie, who mind you is an anagram of Issue, except with 0 letters off. And Ralsei, who is an anagram of Asriel, and who is later to be revealed as the freaking physical embodiment of Asriel. Toby, you never fail to be subtle. These new characters venture through what seems to be a kinda imaginary, kinda real world. I'll just leave it at that, because I'm sure if I pick either side, the theorists out there are gonna write out their entire college thesis about why Deltarune is actually secretly a communist manifesto. Anyways, this world houses brand new enemies and settings based on the real world. In Chapter 1, there are chessboards, poker chips, cards, etc. While in Chapter 2, it goes for a more techno feel, using electrical plugs, TV screens, and more. Chapter 1 is a pretty standard yet strong start to this game. It actually has gameplay, which is something Bendy and the Ink Machine's Chapter 1 never really had, or really ever had for the most part. Deltarune starts strong by setting up this game's new cast. Chris is basically Frisk from Undertale, but hit a bit of a growth spurt. He also does this funny little dance at one part in the game. I like that part. Susie, Chris's new friend, introduces a really interesting dynamic. She's fundamentally a stereotype, the bully who is poor and has no friends, and she unleashes her anger onto others.
Was that the bite of 87?
But Susie's character arc is really fascinating to me. She befriends this little prince named Lancer. Lancer is an incompetent, cute little villain. He is always trying to thwart Chris and gang, but fails spectacularly. Susie and Lancer form a bond, and it warms my heart. The best part being they actually stay friends, and Lancer even tags along in Chapter 2, and does in fact have an integral role in that plot. This is a really important deal for me to point out, as it's an easy example for me to illustrate that Toby is naturally progressing the plot by building off of elements from Chapter 1, instead of each chapter feeling like its own segmented adventure from other chapters. Ralsei is a personal highlight for me, probably since he reminds me a lot of me. I am the Ralsei of the group. There is a reason you never hear me curse in any of my videos.
She went from self-contained love interest for Henry to a badass.
He's got such a calm nature and even has his own character arc. He begins to realize that not everyone in the world is some happy-go-lucky go-getter, and sometimes we have to work around those differences. Yeah, go get him, Ralsei, just fuck. He also learns how to use sarcasm, and it is adorable. A bit of an odd detail to point out, but isn't me or is Lancer's laugh very similar sounding to the clown car sound effect in Super Mario World's final boss? Have a listen. And second off, the castle in Chapter 1 had a design that, if you ask me, must have been inspired by Count Bleck's castle in Super Paper Mario. Pretty neat. I won't cover Chapter 2 as much, as I highly recommend you play it for yourself. Both chapters are free, for crying out loud, available on both PC and Nintendo Switch. You can play this amazing game with any of your Joy-Con colors. God, I really gotta stop bringing that up. Chapter 2 introduces us to this techno world, and admittingly, while it's not really a favorite theme of mine, I think it's kind of overdone. Toby puts its own spin on it, and still keeps it interesting enough for me to not really mind that much. 2 new characters added to this game from the classroom end up in this same wacky world, and they are just so fun.
Ah, Chris, late again, I see.
Is that Joey Swanson from Family Guy? Oh, gee, Peter.
The villain is very hip and trendy, which, again, the kind of internet meme-y humor doesn't always land for me. And while this chapter leans into that a lot, I would be lying to myself if I didn't say I didn't laugh a handful of times to these little quips. Rosie makes a peanut reference, now that's just adorable. There's this shady salesman that is trying to rip you off, and oh, there's just the characters, man. Toby gives many of them a sort of colloquialism unique to them, and it makes individual characters feel so different from one another and how they talk. The length of this chapter is huge. Just chapters 1 and 2 alone are equivalent to the length of Undertale. And it's free! Just go download this game already! I know this video is short and sweet, but I really wanted to give you guys my own impressions of this game. Just like how Undertale flipped our expectations by subverting them, showing us how our choices permanently impact our playing experience, Deltarune alternatively flips our expectations of what we think it will be going into it. It's a game not about choice. Not only does the game illustrate this when booting the game up, stating how, quote, no one can choose who they are in this world, but there are certain options the game won't even let you select adding on to this theme. There are so many other points I wanted to mention but didn't go over. The combat system got a much needed boost and now feels fully fleshed out. The overworld is much more interesting with not only characters to talk to, but also in how progression is handled. Like I said earlier, Deltarune takes all the great parts of Undertale and makes its own thing out of it, even better than its predecessor. Going back to the beginning of this video, it's time to address why I like these games so much. Why does Toby Fox connect to me? Well, it's because he knows his audience. Just like Scott Cawthon with the anime cutscenes in FNAF Ultimate Custom Night, Toby has a clear self-awareness of everything. His games are fun, they are whatever is conjured up in his mind. Even the Undertale / Deltarune trailers have a certain goofiness to them all. He's wild and wacky, and he's not afraid to show off that creative side in his work. And that's the true connection I personally have with these games. Through my writing and editing, I try to have fun with it. Is making a Smash montage unnecessary in a Minecraft Dungeons video? Absolutely. But conversely, is creating a mecha killer duck only for it to be blown up and then it coming back to be a key component in defeating the final boss of Chapter 2 necessary? By the same logic I had applied earlier, no. This has been week 2 of Danerade month. Next week's topic will be on, okay guys, who asked for a sequel?
The Fitness Gram Pacer Test is a multi-stage aerobic capacity test that progressively gets more
Huh? You all thought this was gonna be extra lore. Well, wait for next week's upload for that. But we need to talk about a certain someone. Each chapter has a secret boss, and I don't want to go over chapter 2's because you should really experience it on your own. But I'll spoil chapter 1. Did you not hear the warning I gave at the beginning of this video? Jevil is unlocked after going through certain lengths to go out of your way to fight him. You know what you're getting yourself into. He talks about how he is trapped behind bars, yet everyone else are the ones who are really trapped. Life is just a game. When you fight him, he goes all wacky and crazy, all accompanied by a stellar theme throughout it all. While not Sans level of hard, as a secret boss fight, this is undeniably one of Deltarune's harder fights. And I love that Toby went out of his way to create such a cool optional boss like this that clearly had a lot of love poured into it, down to the Earthbound and Chrono Trigger inspired backdrop. I almost wish it was part of the regular path just so that more people wouldn't miss it. Jevil, you are pretty cool.
Bye-bye!